But basically, Winlink has this great feature for handling tactical addresses and auxiliary call signs. There's pros and cons for using them, but Brett caught on very early to where tactical addresses have a value in the hospital net type of world. So with that, I got one more adjustment here to make, and then I'm ready to go. So what are the benefits? I don't know why my keyboard's not working to move to the next page. What are the benefits of tactical addresses? Well, hey, a tactical address can provide functional identification. So, for example, here in Gwinnett, we have club calls for our 3 hospitals and our health department we support. Club call for Duluth is KK4FGL. If I wouldn't have told you that, or you didn't see Duluth next to it, would you have ever guessed that that was the Winlink address for Northside Hospital Duluth? And the answer is probably, with the exception of Steve and Brett, no, or my team that's online here. So it provides a functional identification in how the tactical address is actually named. Now, we encourage all of our hospitals to have a club call. And a tactical address can be an alternative for a club call. And I have that asterisk there for a real reason, to remind me that peer-to-peer is not supported by tactical addresses. Now, as I talk, by the way, I may by mistake say tactical call. It's not. It's not a real call sign. It's a tactical address. Now, one of the other things that I have personally experienced, another benefit of a tactical address. How many of you have set up, and I'm going to have a terminology here for you. When you bring up Winlink Express, in that top left corner is your call sign. And you can add additional call signs or additional Winlink account access using that top left corner. That top left corner is called the primary call sign. So terminology, just remember what you are currently running Winlink Express as, that identity you're running is the primary call. So in my case, when I bring up Winlink Express, it's N7GR. Okay, so when you fill in your setup page, you enter in a recovery email address. You enter in contact information. If you share your primary call and its password with another user, and they set it up in their Winlink client, there's a high risk that if they do it incorrectly, they're going to overwrite your contact information. They're going to overwrite your recovery email address. And I have personally experienced this with someone overwriting my password and the recovery email address, making it go to the winlink.org admins to get me out of that predicament. So tactical addresses, that's it, and auxiliary call signs also. You do not enter in contact information. You do not enter in a recovery address when you set these up, and we'll see an example. The worst thing that can happen with tactical addresses and auxiliary call signs when shared through the process that we'll see is that you may inadvertently change a password for an existing tactical address or a auxiliary call. But because you don't have access to the recovery email, guess what? You can recover from that situation. So that's, I think, a very good value. Another point to bring out, when you have tactical addresses and auxiliary call signs enabled in underneath your primary call, when you go and check for message traffic, it'll check for your traffic for your primary call. It will check for traffic for any tactical addresses or auxiliary call signs you have enabled. That's a nice benefit, but there's a procedural step that you need to be aware of, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So the other aspect is for obvious reasons, when you're creating a tactical address, the CMS server is going to say, does that one already exist? It does, and you will not be able to create that. You'll have to choose another tactical address. Once you have created a tactical address, it's yours until it is either deleted or expires. And I believe it's 400 days of misuse and it goes out of the system. Tactical addresses have their own winlink.org login account. This is a very valuable feature. So when you create a tactical address, you can create it with or without a password. The winlink.org folks highly encourage you to create one with a password. And why? Because it protects access to that account at winlink.org. So when you create a tactical address, what I want you to do next is go to winlink.org, log into that tactical address account, and enter in the recovery email address. Enter in the contact information. And that way, you're protected if the password is forgotten or through misuse got changed by another user. What is a tactical address in terms of syntax? Hey, anywhere from 3 to 12 total characters long, right? Now, there's some specifics about what you can put in those 3 to 12 characters. The first characters must only be alpha characters, capital letters, A through Z, and it must be a minimum of 3. Now, following those 3 characters, you can put in a dash. It's the only special character allowed, followed by alphanumeric characters. So no numbers are allowed to the left of the dash, and there's no spaces or any other special characters currently allowed. Examples, for example, you've already seen Northside Hospital -Duluth. I also have a Northside NSH-Gwinnett for the main campus. GMA is valid. Hey, it's greater than 3 characters. It's only 4. Lookout -1 is valid. Why? Because the numeric 1 is to the right of the dash. There's no numeric character to the left. And Gwinnett CESC is valid. It's 12 characters in length, and it has a hyphen in it, and it meets the other requirements. Invalid. A tactical address, this is too long. That's interesting. Rest stop 1, not valid because you have to have that dash or hyphen preceding any numeric numbers. Let's go ahead and set up a tactical address. So everyone has seen the Winlink Express properties page, the main page that you set up an account with. And in that page, as you can see here, there is a auxiliary call signs and tactical address field, and add entry, and it gives you a pop-up window. Here you enter your tactical address following the syntax requirements mentioned earlier, and a password, and passwords are now case sensitive in the world of the Winlink organization. Notice that there's a show password checkbox, and that show password checkbox is only enableable on the initial creation of that tactical address or auxiliary call sign. Once you've created the tactical address in your setup or have added an auxiliary call sign to your setup, that show password feature is no longer enableable. That's a recent change done in the last few weeks. On that same pop-up, you see that checkbox that says enable. By default, when you create a tactical address or auxiliary call sign, it pops up with enable. And we'll talk more about the use of that in just a moment. So here's an example. Northside Hospital Duluth has already been established as a tactical address. I can no longer click the show password to see what that is. So when you create a tactical address, remember to write down the password on a slip of paper, and then go to winlink.org and do as I recommended, to enter a recovery email address. So here in number 2 there, you can see I have 3 tactical addresses set up, of which only Northside Duluth is currently enabled. So when I go to look for message traffic, it's not going to worry about the GAOC or GNR Health. It's only going to look for my primary call sign traffic plus the Duluth tactical address. If you haven't figured it out, it's probably obvious. How do you disable or re-enable a tactical address, or for that matter, as you'll see, an auxiliary call sign? You simply select on the list the tactical address or auxiliary call sign you wish to enable or disable. In this case, Northside Hospital Duluth is enabled, and I want to disable it. I click Edit Entry, and then you can see in item number 3, you get that pop-up again, and you simply uncheck enabled, or if it was not enabled, you would check enabled, obviously, to go forward. So how do I send a message using a tactical address? So I'm going to pick on Brett again because he's nice to pick on. And Steve next is nice to pick on, right? So I'm going to send Brett a hospital check-in 213. And I want to use my tactical address for the hospital. So you all recognize the new message window here that's shown in item number 1. What's different now when you have tactical addresses and auxiliary call signs enabled is that from field goes from just your call sign to now a drop-down list of selectable tactical addresses and auxiliary call signs. In this example, I only have Northside Hospital Duluth enabled. And so I simply check, I drop down and I check Northside Hospital Duluth, and I send it on its merry way through normal process, post, and then start a session and send it off. What Brett gets is item number 2. He gets the text message, and if he's looking at it in the message manager app window, he sees that it's from Northside Hospital Duluth. Now, to keep FCC happy, notice there's a field there called source, and it has N7GRB. So the message does carry the actual sender's call sign, but in the from and on his inbox, he'll see Northside Hospital Duluth. Considerations when using tactical addresses, and I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can. I apologize that we're running a little bit late. I mentioned earlier that there's some considerations when using tactical addresses, and this is very, very important. Only enable a tactical address or an auxiliary call sign when you are the designated on-shift operator to which the tactical address or call sign is associated. So can you imagine what would happen if I've got my team over at Northside Hospital Duluth, the hospital has provided a PC, Winlink is set up, and it's got the tactical addresses for the hospital enabled, and they're looking for traffic in, and they're sending out traffic, and they're looking for inbound traffic for the hospital. I at home have my Winlink Express client up and running underneath my primary call sign N7GRB. And oh my gosh, I forgot to disable the tactical address for the hospital. And I go check my message traffic for my primary call. You want to take a guess what's going to happen? And the answer is there's a race condition to that mail at winlink.org. So if you're not the designated operator responsible for that tactical addresses traffic, everyone else needs to disable it, and you need to have it enabled. And then for those hospitals that do not have hospital provided PCs and you're bringing your own laptops, which I know there's quite a few that have that, make sure that when you do that operator shift in a real incident, that the offgoing operator disables in his laptop that tactical address and the oncoming enables it. Okay. I've talked about changing the password in Winlink Express may affect the ability of others. So you do need the correct password for the tactical address to initially associate it when you set it up in your Winlink Express. But if you come along later and go back to that edit screen that we talked about earlier, and you change the password and you do an update, guess what's going to happen? It's going to change it also at winlink.org. And that's also why it's important for that recovery email. Lastly, tactical address versus the primary call sign. So Northside Hospital Duluth is a tactical address that was created by its usage associated with the KK4 FGL club, all right? Now, I am using my own Winlink account, N7GRB, my primary call sign, and I have the Northside Hospital Duluth tactical address enabled. When I go and retrieve messages from the CMS server, I will only get traffic from my primary call that I'm using and the Northside Duluth Hospital. I will not get the message traffic for KK4FGL. There is a way around it. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but just be aware that and this is an example where KK4FGL, that club call, created that tactical address, and I do not have, and I'm using my own primary call sign, and I only have the tactical address enabled. I only see email for that tactical address. Lastly, peer-to-peer sessions are not supported with tactical addresses. So if we have a grid down scenario, you need to have communicated beforehand, and the 205 is perfect for that, right? What your primary call sign is for your hospital. And this is also another reason why you should be getting a club call for your served hospitals. Segue into auxiliary call signs, and this is really fast because you set them up the same way you do tactical addresses, except in this case, an auxiliary call sign is a real-world FCC call sign that has a Winlink account. And they're enabled, disabled, just like you did with the tactical addresses. That's a real quick and dirty. Now, I mentioned earlier that example of running N7GRB as the primary call. So I could, and here's an example of, I have a hospital with a club call, KK4FGL, I have a tactical call, I have both those enabled. So what that's going to allow me to do is to see the traffic for that goes to either one of the club call and or the tactical address. So that's essentially an example here that we're talking about. And here's an example of sending a message using a auxiliary call sign. That drop-down list on the new message window, the new message handler, you can see that I have, in this case, I've got my primary call. I've got 3 auxiliary calls for each of the 3 hospitals I have. And I could have the GNR one in there too if I was going for it. And I have the Northside Hospital Duluth. In this case, I'm going to pick on Brett again. Brett, I'm sending you another 213, and I've selected what to use my hospital auxiliary call. And what Brett will get in his inbox, as talked earlier, is something that looks like this. You'll see the sender is KK4FGL, and the real world person call sign being used for the actual message traffic is my primary call sign N7GRB. Man, I blitzed through that real fast. I apologize. A lot of information to cover. So at this point in time, going back to ask any input from the team, questions or comments, and I will post these to the Georgia Aries site.